Hello, and welcome to the start of a new class. I am your professor, Dr. Thomas Johnson. Most students simply call me Dr. J. Since this is an online class, we do not have the opportunity to meet face to face and see each other. Therefore, I have included a photograph of me from a few years ago on my motorcycle so you can see what I look like. This video's purpose is to not only welcome you to the class, but also to introduce you to me so you know more about my background. I grew up in a military family as my father served in the U.S. Air Force. Because of this, I moved around quite a bit. This moving around also exposed me to many events that helped form the basis for my interest in emergency and disaster management. I was born in Mobile, Alabama, when my father was stationed at Brookley Air Force Base. We only lived there for a few months as my father was then transferred to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. This was early in my life, so I have very little recollection of living at Fort Leonard Wood. From Missouri, we moved to New York City. My father served as a military recruiter there, and we resided in the borough of Brooklyn. I remember that we lived in a high-rise apartment, and I would often climb up on the windowsill and look down at the street below. I mention this because now that I teach in the Emergency and Disaster Management program, whenever I think of high-rise fires or similar disasters, I reflect back on living in that apartment. After New York, we moved to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where my father was stationed at nearby Seward Air Force Base. This is where I lived the longest when I was a child, residing here for approximately 8 years. This was also my first exposure to a higher education institution, as Murfreesboro is home to Middle Tennessee State University. While we were in Murfreesboro, we briefly moved to Miami, Florida, where my father was assigned to Homestead Air Force Base. It was while I was in Miami that I experienced my first hurricane, Hurricane Cleo. I was 10 years old at the time, and it was a very monumental event in my life, and I still have vivid memories of it today. From Murfreesboro, we moved to Bellevue, Nebraska, which is located just outside of Omaha. Bellevue is home to Offutt Air Force Base, where my father was stationed. Being a plain state, we experienced severe winters with many snowstorms, blizzards, and ice storms. I learned not only to deal with these storms, but also how to work outside in them. It was not too long after we left Bellevue that my father retired from the Air Force and we relocated to Pensacola, Florida, where I lived most of my life. I finished high school in Pensacola and began my adult work career. I started to work for the Pensacola Police Department at age 21. In addition to general law enforcement duties, I had the occasion to work some unusual events including 2 hurricanes, a major flood, and a major airline crash. After 6 years with the Pensacola Police Department, I moved across the bay to the Gulf Breeze Police Department. For a good part of my time there, I served as a motorcycle officer. I also had the occasion to work several mass crowd events such as beach festivals, spring break events, and Blue Angels air shows. I also worked another hurricane. I enjoyed working for the Gulf Breeze Police Department and could have easily worked the remainder of my career with this agency. Regrettably, like most small-town police departments, it did not pay its officers well, and I made an economic decision to look for a better paying job. I was hired as a lieutenant for the University of West Florida Police Department. At this time, all state law enforcement agencies in Florida were paid at the same scale. Therefore, it provided me with a substantial pay increase. Working with the University Police Department proved very interesting. I was involved in the only shooting of my career while at UWF. I also worked my last homicide case there when a young student was abducted, raped, and murdered on campus. I spent 9 years at the UWF Police Department. Towards the end of my time there, I had aspirations for becoming a police chief and began to send out resumes. I was employed as the police chief for the Marshall University Police Department in Huntington, West Virginia, and spent 2.5 years in this position. During my time there, Marshall University played in 2 national championship football games at the 1AA level. I was charged with the responsibility for writing and managing the security plans for protecting the stadium, crowds, traffic, and television crews during these games. Additionally, then-President Clinton kicked off his re-election campaign at Marshall University, and I worked with many federal, state, and local agencies to ensure the protection of the president and his family while they were at Marshall University. I left Marshall University for the Mississippi State University Police Department. Mississippi State University is the largest university in the state and a member of the prestigious Southeastern Conference. During my time at Mississippi State University, I had the occasion to work numerous large crowd events and traffic situations, such as home athletic events, as well as VIP visits. For example, former President George Bush Sr. visited the campus, and again I worked with the Secret Service to ensure his safety and protection. Mississippi State University is located in a unique area and sees its share of tornadoes and ice storms. The most notable event I experienced at Mississippi State University occurred immediately after the September 11th terrorist attacks. For those of you who remember, all professional and college athletic events were canceled the weekend following the attacks. Following that weekend, Mississippi State University hosted the University of South Carolina in a night ESPN football game that was broadcast nationally. I was given 2 days' notice to develop a plan to protect the stadium from a possible terrorist attack. It took a lot of work, but I was able to pull a plan together and work with many local, state, and federal agencies to protect the stadium and the crowd. The day after the game, I was contacted by many other colleges and universities and even a few professional teams asking for information about my plan as well as copies. Another event was that in my last month at Mississippi State University, we had to deal with a student who was making homemade pipe bombs in his dorm room. This necessitated the evacuation of the residence hall and the summoning of a military EOD team to remove the explosives. I finished my law enforcement career as the police chief for the Western Carolina University Police Department. For approximately the last 20 years of my law enforcement career, I had the opportunity to teach as an adjunct professor with several different colleges and universities. While I was with the Western Carolina University, I developed a relationship with the Criminology and Criminal Justice Department and began teaching as an adjunct professor in the Criminal Justice program. I enjoyed being a professor and made plans to seek a teaching position when I retired from law enforcement. Institutions at which I have taught as an adjunct professor include Pensacola Junior College, Troy State University, the University of West Florida, Marshall University, Mississippi State University, and Western Carolina University. Although my background is predominantly as a law enforcement officer, I did serve a tour in the United States Coast Guard Reserves. My rate was Port Security First Class. In this rate, on my active duty drills, I worked in several seaports along the Gulf Coast. My work as a coastie gave me a great appreciation for the monumental task of protecting our country from terrorist activity, such as smuggling a nuclear device in a shipboard container or an attack on a port that can occur throughout our nation's ports. Because of my service in the Coast Guard Reserves, as well as growing up in a military family, I have a great appreciation for our students who either are serving in the military or have formerly served in the military. Further, I also appreciate the sacrifices that their families have made. I have provided you with an overview of my work experiences. I will also share my educational qualifications with you. I received an Associates of Science degree in law enforcement from Pensacola Junior College, a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice from Troy State University, a Master of Arts degree in psychology from the University of West Florida, and a Doctor of Philosophy degree in instructional systems, leadership, and workforce development from Mississippi State University. I have also completed graduate studies in criminal justice at Fayetteville State University and emergency management at Eastern Kentucky University and the University of North Carolina, Pembroke. I would like to add that, like most of you, I was a non-traditional student for most of my college career. That is, I had a full-time job, a family, and other obligations, and had to work attending classes into my busy schedule. I also had the disadvantage of attending college in the 1900s BC. BC meaning before computers. This resulted in my taking many night and weekend classes. It wasn't until I got into graduate school that computers came on the scene and made the job of being a non-traditional student a little easier. Therefore, I understand and appreciate what many of you are going through as you pursue your degree. While the information I have shared with you tells you much about me professionally, it does not tell you much about who I am as a person. I am a big fan of classic rock music. I currently play bass guitar in a church band and hope one day to play in a classic rock band. I ride a Goldwing motorcycle, although not nearly as much as I used to. I have ridden in 26 states on my Goldwing motorcycle. My current hobby centers around a 1978 Dodge pickup truck that I have restored as a California Highway Patrol vehicle. I belong to the Smoky Mountain Cruisers, a classic car club, and exhibit my truck in car shows and drive it in parades. I hope this video gives you some insight into my background. I encourage you to visit the introduction discussion board if you have not done so already and share some interesting facts about your background. Feel free to share any information about yourself, but only that information that you are comfortable with sharing. Again, welcome to the class, and I wish you a successful semester.